Hello, welcome to I Read This Book with me, Chris. Today we'll be talking about To Kill a Mockingbird, and by that I mean we're really going to be talking about how our education system failed us when it came to reading. And today, for my drink, I have cookies and cream ice cream. Oreo ice cream is my favorite ice cream, and this is cookies and cream, which is basically Oreo. To Kill a Mockingbird is an American classic by Harper. It's a book that is quite good and was forced upon me in 8th grade, which is about the time that I stopped reading. I was a pretty big reader all the way through kindergarten. I started reading Calvin and Hobbes comic strips. Then in elementary school, I read a bunch of books. I loved the Choose Your Own Adventure. I loved the Boxcar Children. And I kept reading all the way up until about 7th and 8th grade. In 7th and 8th grade is where English class stopped teaching you English and started teaching you really crappy ways of reading literature. So then all the way through middle school and high school, you were forced to read books which, for the most part, were either not great, or if they were good, they would go and wring all of the joy out of it. I did learn quite a bit in those English classes. However, the major thing I learned was how to not enjoy reading. I only got back into reading where I read quite a bit about 4 years ago. I was in my mid-20s, 23, 24, 25, I don't know, something like that. And I read all the way up until I was 13. So there's over a decade where I spent hardly any time reading books. Part of that was due to social media and YouTube and all that jazz. But I think most of that was the fact that reading all the joy was taken out of it by really crappy English classes. I tried to look up on the internet what are the different elements of writing, trying to figure out what exactly, and a lot of them seem to make sense, but a lot of the lists either go too far or don't go far enough. So this list here is 7 elements of creative writing: characters, theme, plot, settings, point of view, conflict, and tone. And I'd like to talk about these while talking about To Kill a Mockingbird. A lot of these elements we talked about in To Kill a Mockingbird. For example, the characters. There's Scout, there's Jem, there's Atticus Finch. Obviously, there's Boo Radley. There's Tom Robinson. There's Dill Harris, Maudie Atkinson, Calpurnia. There's a whole list of characters. The main characters I'd like to talk about would be Scout Finch and Atticus Finch and Jem Finch. You learn a lot about these characters reading through the book. So Scout Finch is a young girl. She starts off, I believe, 6 and ends up around 9 years old throughout the book. There's Scout, who is a couple years older than her. So he ends up being 13, I believe. So he starts off being 10, 11, something like that. Atticus Finch, who is their parent. You learn a lot about these characters, and you can see how they change throughout the book, which is perfectly fine. When it comes to characters, the interesting part of characters is characters are the people, right? They're the people in the book. Where do they start off? Where do they end? How do they change? Do the people have a bit of a mean streak to them? When they get frustrated, do they get a little angry? Do they act in ways that maybe they shouldn't? What are they after? Are they after power? Are they after glory? Are they after being good? Are they after doing their job? These are the elements that you're looking for character. Then there are a couple of ones that are a little confusing, especially when in 8th grade when I first read this book. Voice, tone, and theme. The main way to think about it that I understand now is voice is who's talking. Tone, how are they talking? And theme, what are they talking about? The voice, the narrator, is Scout Finch, who is a young girl. Her tone is as an innocent young girl, obviously. She seems confused at certain points. She's very opinionated. And the theme is what is she talking about? Mainly she's talking about how to deal in society with those who are lesser than you, those who are below you in the social strata. There's Boo Radley and there's Tom Robinson. The first half of the book, the first section of the book is about her, Scout, her brother Jem, and their friend Dill, how they deal with a neighbor, Boo Radley, who was a recluse. When he was a child, he did certain things he shouldn't, and instead of getting sent to jail, his father said, hey, we'll keep him in the house. And ever since then, for over a decade, he's been living in the house As far as they know, not leaving the house, never going to the store, never going to church, never going to anything. And in there you see the immaturity of these three children. They play games trying to figure out who this person is, why there's this mystery going on. You hear stories about what did Boo Radley do, why did he end up in the state that he's in. And then in the second half of the book, you hear about Tom Robinson. This book is set in the 1930s. This is during the Jim Crow era. And Tom Robinson is a black man, a Negro, who is accused of raping a white woman, and so is arrested and put to trial. Scout's father, Atticus Finch, is the public defender, is the person who defends Tom Robinson against this charge. It is able to prove to everyone reading the book Tom Robinson is in fact innocent, or at least there is not enough evidence to convict Tom Robinson. Really, there's enough to say, no, he should go free. But this is the time where racial relations are such, if a black man is ever accused of raping a white woman, for whatever reason, no matter what the evidence turns, the white woman is going to be assumed to be right, and the black man is automatically assumed to be wrong. He's always going to be guilty no matter what. That's the main story. However, why am I bringing this up? English class fails you because it talks about Boo Radley. In English class, I learned about Boo Radley, about Tom Robinson. I focused on Atticus Finch, on Jem, on Scout, on Dill. Those are the main characters. Do you know what was not at all taught in my English class? Was completely left out. All of the Christian elements in the story. The United States, during this time, was a very Christian nation, especially in the South. The town was divided, Baptist versus Methodists. And in there, you saw what it was like to be Atticus Finch, religious Christian man, set in the 1930s in the Jim Crow South, how he was seeking justice for a black man in a time where he knew black man was always going to be guilty. There's hardly any chance for freedom. Yet he fought for it anyway. How he taught his children what it meant to be a Christian, what it meant to view that all people were equal under the eyes of God, and should be equal in the eyes of the law, and should be equal in the eyes of man. It doesn't matter if you're white or Negro. And all of these elements, not a single one, this is me reading this as a 27-year-old. All I saw were the Christian elements, and yet not a single part of this was discussed in my English class. Not a single part of that was discussed in my English class. They would focus on the theme. They would focus on the tone versus the voice. What does it mean? They'd focus on the plot. What happened, then what happened, then what happened. What does it mean for this to happen and that to happen? But the main overarching theme, completely ignored. How can you read To Kill a Mockingbird, whether you are a Christian or not, and not see the main thing that was going on there, especially in the second half, especially in the trial of Tom Robinson, especially in the way Atticus Finch acted towards Tom Robinson, that hey, this is all about Atticus Finch doing his best to be a good Christian. There was a scene, Tom Robinson was arrested and then was sent from the small town they were in to another jail 70 miles away. Then as the trial was approaching, they brought him back. Atticus knew the day he came back, and he went outside, brought his chair, sat outside the jail, reading a newspaper, waiting for the mob he knew was coming to lynch Tom Robinson. The children going around, looking for their father, went from one place to the other, and then saw, it was in the evening, a light over the jail, and as they approached, they saw Atticus Finch sitting at the jail in his chair, and they saw a mob approaching the jail. Was there any discussion in my class about what this means? No. What was Atticus Finch doing here? Obviously, he was going in to protect Tom Robinson without a weapon, sitting, and then standing in between the mob and the man. And yet, throughout all of this, the one thing that stands out to me most now, which is the character of Atticus Finch, and the fact that he is the way he is because of his religious beliefs. None of this was discussed. It was all about the technical aspects. What was the tone? What was the voice? What were these themes about justice? And is justice an important theme? Of course. Were the characters important? Of course. Was the plot important? Of course. Was the setting important? Of course. The point of view? Of course. But the most important thing when reading To Kill a Mockingbird is not the setting. You could change the setting to several other settings. What if it wasn't What if it wasn't the Jim Crow South? What was before that? Would that have changed much? No. The same story could have happened pre-Civil War South, where there were slaves. It could have happened pre-Revolution South, get rid of the South. It could have happened throughout many parts of the world, where there were different classes and different levels, depending on your race. Or, what about in Rome? When there were citizens versus non-citizens. Did you know if you were a citizen of Rome, you would have to be taken to trial before you were whipped, before you were taken to jail? There were certain things that you had, certain rights that you had, that if you weren't a citizen, if you were just someone who lived in Rome, you could just be taken and beaten, and you'd have nothing to stay for. Had nothing at all to do with race. This story could have happened there. A citizen standing up for non-citizen. It could have happened in communist Russia, except there is no justice system, therefore. But a very similar story could have happened there. The setting, not super important. Was it important? Yes. But not that important. The conflict. A innocent man being falsely accused. That could happen. Did happen. Has happened. Throughout the world. The tone. What's the tone? The tone, due to the narrator, is innocence. Yet, not straight innocence. An innocent child trying to understand. The tone is innocence and confusion and naivety. Well, fully understanding the world, but not fully understanding the world. The perspective that you could get really well from a child. That is that interesting? Yes. Is it good? Yes. Does it make To Kill a Mockingbird the beautiful masterpiece it is? Yes. However, should not be the most interesting part of To Kill a Mockingbird. The plot. The plot's super easy, right? I'm sure you could read it in many other books. Innocent man, found guilty, loses all hope, commits suicide. Okay. Plot is needed. If you don't, there are some books I've read that don't have plot, or not much of a plot. Plot's important. The characters are important. The most important thing, while reading this, completely missed. Imagine reading Hitchhiker's Guide to a Galaxy in English class. Maybe you did read it. I doubt it. What would you have gained from reading it? Versus you reading that book. Well, your friend read that book and then you talked about it. Maybe reading that book in a book club with other people who just enjoy reading, whose main point is not to try to teach you something about the book, but just to try to have a discussion so you can get further into it. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, as I'm sure most of you know, absolute modern masterpiece. Is about a man, Arthur Dent, on the day that the Earth, is set for destruction. His friend says, hey, I'm an alien, the Earth's about to be destroyed. Then pulls a regular Englishman off the Earth as the Earth is destroyed into a world, into a universe full of strange, confusing, different things. Weird things constantly happen. It's a very nihilistic book, which I appreciate. It's not trying to be anything else. Now imagine reading that in English class. And I'm a guy who, I passed all my English classes. I never got less than a B in any of my English classes. I knew how to write the BS. how much of the joy of your life would be ripped out, has been ripped out, due to poor English classes? So, what exactly, you might be asking, is the point of this video, besides just trashing English class? Why do we have to read such crappy books in English? There are two books that I read throughout my 5, 6 years of English class from middle school to high school that I still think are good books and I still read. One of is To Kill a Mockingbird, which I've recently reread, and the other one is The Great Gatsby. All of the other books were crap. Maybe they could have been good if I didn't read them in English class. I read Ender's Game, which I'm sure I would have appreciated if it wasn't read in English class. It's an okay book, not great. It's good. Maybe I would think it's better than good if I didn't read it in English. There was The Grapes of Wrath, which was really crappy, really creepy book. There was The Catcher in the Rye, which I think you can only enjoy if you are a young 14-year-old. If you are about to turn 15, I think you think it's crap. I think if you are about to turn 14, you're about to think it's crap. I think if you're about 14 years old to about 14 and 6 months, I think if you're 14 years old, 6 months and a day, you think it's crap. If you're 14-year-old, 6 months, you read it, I think it's good. There's about 6 months in your life you can read the book and not think it's crap. I can't remember most of the other books I read. Trying to remember other books I read. The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. Not a good book. Don't recommend reading it. Read that in English class. Let's fix our English classes, guys. Books are great.